Good morning and welcome to the New Power of Labor event. I'm George Donnelly, a partner at the State House News Service and its sister publication, MASSterList. We're a daily political and policy news service. Some say it's indispensable. And we also hold a handful of events on major policy issues and trends. Earlier this year in this room, we were in this room to discuss renewable energy challenges, then healthcare, and today, labor and its new and important leverage. We're grateful and honored to have Labor Secretary Marty Walsh here to kick off the event. Thank you, Marty. And we're also grateful for the support and participation of many leading labor organizations in Massachusetts. As we all know, the labor market and how we think about work has been turned upside down in the COVID era, and changes only seem to be accelerating. We're here to explore the new dynamics, and after the Secretary speaks, we'll have a panel with 5 labor leaders moderated by the Boston Globe's Katie Johnston. We want to thank our sponsors: Benchmark Strategies, Massachusetts Marine Trades Association, Roofers Local 33, Northeast Regional Council of SMART, 1199 SEIU United Healthcare Workers East, NAGE, Massachusetts AFL-CIO, Unite Here Local 26, the 617 Media Group, SEIU 32BJ, Greater Boston Building Trades Unions, North Atlantic States Regional Council of Carpenters, and United Auto Workers Region 9A, Massachusetts CAP. And now I'd like to welcome Chrissy Lynch, Chief of Staff of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, to introduce Secretary Walsh. Welcome, Chrissy. Thank you.
Good morning, union sisters, brothers, siblings, allies, acquaintances, friends. My name is Chrissy Lynch. I'm the Chief of Staff of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. It's an honor to be here today on behalf of President Tolman to introduce somebody who has been a mentor of mine, and I know so many people in this room, and somebody who's making us all proud every day with what he is doing for our country. Marty Walsh is a card-carrying member of Labor's Local 223. He took the civic engagement and activism that we hold so dear in the union movement to the State House, where he was a champion for working people for over a decade. As the leader of the Greater Boston Building Trades Union, he ensured that our skyline is built with the highest possible standards, where workers are the most highly trained and safest, where they earn family-sustaining wages, health care, and retirement benefits, where they have the economic stability to invest in our local communities, and where they can afford to live where they build. Throughout this, always striving to create a more diverse and inclusive industry and labor movement. To be very intentional about creating a more diverse and inclusive workforce, Marty pioneered new pre-apprenticeship models to bring more women, people of color, and members of underserved communities to the unionized construction industry. The Building Pathways and Operation Exit pre-apprenticeship programs that Secretary Walsh created provide participants with the knowledge and skills needed to enter and succeed in registered union apprenticeship programs and further in full careers with the union building trades. But these pre-apprenticeship programs have flourished into something much more. They provide guidance matching workers to childcare needs and other life supports to ensure success in the industry and in our movement. This model has now been replicated across Massachusetts and across the entire country. As mayor, Secretary Walsh created over 130,000 good jobs. Recognizing that childcare is crucial to somebody having access to a good job, he also created a universal pre-K program. And during the unprecedented crisis of the first year of the COVID pandemic, Mayor Walsh was an international leader in how a city should respond. President Biden promised to be the strongest labor president in American history. And we know he meant it when he tapped Marty to be his labor secretary. There's a lot of damage to undo to recover from the failed policies of the last administration, and Marty is making us all very proud because we know he hit the ground running. I could go on. I think everybody gets the picture. It's my honor to now ask Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh to come on up.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chrissy. And I remember just Chrissy talks about being a mentor. I remember watching her just rise up through the ranks and working at the AFL-CIO way back in the day, and then the building trades and the AFL-CIO now. So I want to thank you for all that you've done, and all the staff and team at the AFL-CIO that's here today. Thank you to President Tolman. Thank you as well. He couldn't get up this morning. He's in bed, so that's why he's not here. So I want to thank him. And you can tell him I said that. To George Donnelly and everyone at State House News Service and Martha, and thank you. We're State House News Service. I know you're around here somewhere. One thing I often laugh about, I told Martha this story. When I was elected mayor of Boston, we got over there, and they didn't have a news service. And, everyone that in this room that has either worked at or works at the State House, you know that you're looking at State House News Service all day long and all night long, and you're reading it, and it's such a great service to the community to let people know what's going on. So I want to thank State House News Service for the amazing work that you do and for having me today. So all the business leaders, community leaders, elected officials that are here today, I'm going to get myself in some serious trouble today because I'm going to be name dropping all day, probably. So if I don't mention your name, doesn't mean I don't love you. It's just that I didn't get to you. So I want to thank you. But I want to thank the elected officials that are here. One of my favorite state representatives in the world, China Tyler's here. Thank you, Representative Tyler. Where are you? There you are. Thank you. State Representative Josh Cutlass here. Thank you, Josh. Representative, where are you? Somewhere. Thank you, Representative. City Councilor Eddie Flynn, the President of City Council, is here somewhere. Thank you, Eddie, for being here. And then some of my former colleagues, Kathy Reinstein. Thank you, Kathy. When I first got elected, Kathy's father was in the House of Representatives, and then Kathy came in 2 years later. Good to see you. John Quinn also was there when I got elected. Thank you, John Quinn. And Dan Cullinane, Dan worked when he first got out of college, actually before he got out of college, was an intern in my office as a state rep, and then he went on to work for me, and then he left me, and he ended up running for state rep. And I want to thank you, Representative, for your help as well, and for being you. And back in 1996, when I started to think about running for office, there's a guy in here that ran my campaign, Mike McDevitt. And so if I do a bad job speaking today, it's his fault. So I want to thank Mike McDevitt as well for your thing. And Marianne McHugh, my first chief of staff ever at the State House. Thank you, Marianne. Good to see you. It's great to be here today with all my friends. To be honest with you, when I walked in the front hallway today, it was great to see so many people that I knew from my past life as being a state rep. Oh, Mike Brady's here. Sorry, Mike. Senator Mike Brady from Brockton. Sorry, Michael. I wouldn't forget you, Mike. We served in the House together as well. But it was great to see so many people because I think often back to the times of me being what I do now, I think back of where I got that foundation. And I kind of got that foundation from Union Halls in Dorchester. From working on campaigns in my area of Dorchester to running for state representative, obviously, and now bringing that to the White House and all over the country. And honestly, it all comes home. I think people in Boston are sick of hearing me talk about Boston. People in Washington are sick of hearing me talk about Boston. Every time I'm talking, I say, I used to be the mayor of Boston, and the reporters laugh now. Oh, were you the mayor of Boston? Yeah, I was at one point. And I talk about it all the time. So I want to just say, again, thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to be here to talk about good jobs, the labor movement. There's no doubt about the recovery, this recovery. Worker power has increased all across the country. You're reading about it in the papers. You're seeing about it on TV. You're hearing about it just about everywhere you go. And workers are looking for and finding better opportunities. And they're finding it both in the labor market and through the labor movement. But I just want to first, I wouldn't be able to give a speech in Boston if I didn't frame it and take you back to when I was mayor of the city of Boston, because it does kind of wrap in. And while I'm talking about the city of Boston, Dave Sweeney's here, one of my chief of staff and CFO. I want to thank you, Dave, for being here with us today. for all that. And I'll keep Sam Ormsby's here. I see Sam Ormsby somewhere over here. Worked at my comm shop. Sam is really happy because when we left as mayor, she went to work comms, but it was nowhere near as busy. So the press in the room, Sam was the one you tortured all the time. But when I was elected mayor of Boston, I clearly had a strong labor background. You knew that, but I didn't hide from it. And I was criticized a lot when I was running for mayor of Boston that I couldn't run the city and I couldn't do a good job. And I was proud of my labor background, and I didn't run from it. But there was a concern among some business community leaders, even in this room, that I didn't value business's point of view. I would not be good for the city's economy or the city's fiscal health. That's what we heard a lot during the campaign. But the truth is, if people studied what I've done, throughout my entire career, I was focused on creating jobs, expanding access to those jobs. I understood the need for investment in growing the growing economy to make sure, whether it was as a state rep or as a mayor or even as the head of the building trades, understanding that we need to have a strong business community as well, partner with us as we move forward here. And I understand that we needed strong fiscal management. So as soon as I got elected, I started to build those relationships with business. I learned what they needed in order to grow. I brought labor and business together so that each side could respect each other. And we moved forward. We approved nearly $48 billion of new development in our city in 7 years. We permitted nearly 50,000 units of housing, more affordable housing units than ever before approved by the city of Boston. We added 140,000 new jobs to our economy in that 7 years. We grew our base of any American city by 20%. We grew our tax base and expanded access to capital. We secured a AAA bond rating 7 consecutive years, which had never been done in the city of Boston ever before. And so we were able to invest in new libraries, in new schools, in new parks, public spaces, playgrounds. And you're able to take that investment just like a business. We ran city halls like a business. Those new investments that we made and those new tax revenues we had, we didn't bloat the payroll. What we did is we put that money back into our economy, we put that money back into our communities so all neighborhoods could benefit from that. And we prioritized equity in all of those investments for communities that needed the greatest. This kind of progress didn't happen and doesn't happen by accident. You have to work at building trust. And you have to be able to listen to anyone that wants to have a conversation about how do we move forward. That's the experience that I brought to the Biden-Harris administration, quite honestly. It was my lived experience, if you will, in the different roles that I had. And if you look at President Biden's success, he has taken a very similar approach. The American Rescue Plan got people back to work and our schools reopened when he first took office. The bipartisan infrastructure laws, investing in roads and bridges, trains and transit, clean drinking water, and affordable high-speed internet. Those of you in this room, when we had to shut down the city of Boston because of COVID, there were some neighborhoods in our city that families didn't have access to internet. So we had to give them hotspots, and we had to give them computers. And that's in rural America, they don't have even those opportunities. So the bipartisan infrastructure law will help and move that forward. The Chips and Science Act is already bringing manufacturing back in a big way. We invented the chip, the microchip that's in our phones and in our cars and in our Ring doorbells and everything that we have. And we don't make them in the United States of America. And the CHIPS bill is going to allow us that opportunity to bring that manufacturing back. Intel already broke ground on a $20 billion project in Ohio where we're going to be building those manufacturings. Part of that pressure to inflation is the fact that we lost all the manufacturing. And we're so dependent on foreign imports to really think about how we move our country forward. So we're bringing some of those back. The Inflation Reduction Act, bringing down health care costs for families and drug costs for seniors. It cuts the deficit. It will cut the deficit $378 billion this year and $1.9 trillion next year, the Inflation Reduction Act the President passed. And it's also going to make the biggest investment in the history of clean energy in our nation right now. So we think about what we're doing on the environment and making sure. These are in the first 19 months of the President's administration, he's passed this legislation. Also, all of these legislative achievements will create incentives for private sector investment. It's not about public investment, it's about private sector investment. And we're also going to create great jobs, especially for workers without a college degree, to make sure that we can, as we continue to build the middle class, we continue to lift people up from the bottom up and the middle out. Because as the President talks about, the trickle-down economy didn't work. We all heard about trickle-down economy. It's going to help. It's going to come right down. It never trickled. Nothing came down. And what happened was the middle class kept going down and the richer kept getting rich. And I have no problem with people who are rich getting richer, but it's how do we pull people up? How do we make sure we do that? At the same time, the President has signed executive orders advancing workers' rights and social justice throughout our economy. He's raised the minimum wage for federal contracting to $15 an hour. When that happened, a lot of businesses said to me, oh my God, we're going to be out of business. Not one business has gone out of business because the federal minimum wage has gone to $15 an hour. Not one business has gone out of business in Massachusetts for getting to the $15 an hour minimum wage. So as our country moves forward, as you think about January of 2021, 10 million people were out of work. Schools were closed, colleges were closed, universities were closed, many of the businesses weren't working. Construction around the country was spotty. Since that time, 10 million Americans have gone back to work. Small business creation reached a record high, and large companies are growing and investing in our country, quite honestly, in every part of our country. As Labor Secretary, my job is to really improve opportunities for working people, making sure that our new investments come with strong labor standards, access to job training and pathways to good careers, worker protection and equity on the job, a secure, dignified retirement, a free and fair choice to join a union if somebody chooses to. I travel the country almost every week talking to workers, employers, unions, advocates, local leaders about the needs of their different neighborhoods. I've also had the opportunity to engage directly with workers and employers on who are having issues. Last October, I traveled to Lancaster, Pennsylvania to stand with the Kellogg workers who were on strike. I wanted to make it clear that this administration backs workers' rights to ask for better opportunities. Later on, I also met with the employer. One thing was clear. Kellogg respected their workers. They got an agreement, and they were able to move forward a stronger workforce and a better understanding of what the needs of the employees are. It was similar a couple weeks ago with the railroad negotiations that happened this month. It was a different situation, but it was also about building trust. There was 2 years of negotiations that went nowhere. Communications had broken down, and trust on both sides had been completely lost. So the President convened an emergency board. It's called the PEB in July. And they came back with a recommendation. And when the recommendation came back, they had until September 16th to reach an agreement. If not, there would be a work stoppage. Our freight rail system would have come to a grinding halt. That would have caused devastation to the U.S. economy and untold harm from loss of food, energy, and health products to communities, and also commuter rail, quite honestly, that was going to be impacted by it. The week of September 16th arrived, there was no agreement. I had said to both sides, if they don't have an agreement by that Wednesday, I expect them in my office at 9 o'clock in the morning. That Wednesday, the next day, Thursday at midnight, would have been the strike, and it would have been a nationwide strike. They came to the Francis Perkins building in Washington, D.C. We had messaging, we had 2 rooms set up for them, and we had meetings going back and forth. We got them to talk again. I gave them a little bit of food. And after 20 straight hours of continually going back and forth and some tough negotiations, some tough conversations, at 5 o'clock in the morning, we had an agreement where both sides were able to sign the document and move us forward. It was a framework of a tentative agreement. Just a few hours before the deadline, there was a lot at stake in our ability to work together. And there are good reasons that working people now are more interested in unions than any other period in the last 50 years. Working people have been through a pandemic. They have reevaluated what they want out of work. They're looking for better opportunities. Unions have a track record of providing those opportunities. I know from my own family experience, my father was a laborer of Labor's Local 223 in Boston, and I followed him into that union. I've seen it all across the country, in every single community in our country, whether it's rural or urban areas. This summer, the President and myself and the Vice President and a bunch of other folks invited a group of organizers to the White House to talk about what their experience had been in the street. They were from warehouses, coffee shops, retail stores, media companies and libraries, non-traditional union workplaces. And they were younger workers, predominantly workers of color and women. The President came in, and they got a huge surprise when he walked in the room. But what surprised me the most when we were having these conversations wasn't the fact that they were talking about wages. They weren't. They were talking about working conditions and that the way they were treated on the job. They were talking about respect. The issue wages never came up in the conversation of these 7 young people that were organizing these different companies. That's why this moment in time is for so many workers. We want to continue to make sure that workers get respect. President Biden wants to make sure workers get respect. We want to make sure working on a job earns them respect. The fact is, something that employers and unions have in common is to address to make sure both sides are moving forward. I often say this when I ran the building trades in Boston. You can't, if the contractors and the developers aren't making money, then there's no need for workers. If you're a corporation in America, you have the workers who work for you and the unions that represent those workers have a vested interest in making sure that you're successful. Because if you're successful, that gives you the opportunity to go out and get more jobs. If you're not successful, what happens? You lay people off. When you lay people off, then you don't have those jobs. So there's an opportunity right now. Right now, we have to keep a couple things in mind. We have to recognize the moment that we're in. We have to adapt to the new environment. And ultimately, we have to work together to move forward. I'm certainly optimistic about this moment in time. I know from working with many of you in this room, that anything is possible when we work together. And I just want to, I know we're going to have a panel here in a minute, but I also want to think about where we are in society. When you think about work, I was having a conversation a minute ago about hybrid work. I've spent a lot of time going all across Wall Street in different parts of the country, talking to businesses about work, getting people back to work. The last 2 years have been difficult. The last 6 years have been difficult for this country. And the last 2 in particular have been really difficult with the pandemic, well, almost 3 now, with the pandemic and life shutting down unexpectedly. None of us in this room, including myself, ever imagined. I never thought for a minute. I'll tell you this once, 2 last stories. I went to, back in early March of 2021, I went and met, 2020, excuse me, I went and met with the president of the Massachusetts Federal Reserve Bank. And when I walked in there, I was meeting him because I wanted to talk to him about the economy. I wanted to see how we're doing in the city of Boston, what we needed to do moving forward. Because what I was concerned about is if construction slows down and development slows down, how do you manage a city because you're so dependent on new property tax to continue your city moving forward? So when I walked in, the president stuck his elbow out at me. And I gave him a little elbow. I didn't know what he was doing. And we sat down, and we talked for about a minute and a half about the economy. And then he went into a long conversation about what's going to happen in the United States of America in the course of the next weeks and months. And I'm listening to him, and he talked about shutting schools down. And he talked about shutting down colleges and businesses. And people were going to have to leave their work and work from home if they could. And I couldn't fathom it myself, to be quite honest with you. And the only thing I could think about, it was a week and a half away from St. Patrick's Day, and anyone watching it, I get beat up every year for switching to St. Patrick's Day parade, and I'm thinking I have to cancel St. Patrick's Day parade. And then I thought about the Boston Marathon. So I went back to my office, a little sobering moment, thinking about, because what happens in other parts of the world doesn't happen here in the United States of America. And then a couple of days later, I met with Jeff Leiden from Vertex Pharmaceutical, and I asked Jeff, I said, Jeff, what do you think is going to happen here? And Jeff said to me, we're going to be shutting schools down. You're going to be shutting schools down. You're going to be shutting colleges down. You're going to be shutting business down. People aren't going to be working. People are going to be working from home. People are going to have to stay in the house. We have a pandemic that's coming to the United States of America. And a couple of days later, I was in the Eagle Room at City Hall, and I was talking to our team. And I brought some reporters in, and I said to them, this is what we're going to do. And even some of the reporters looked at me, I had editors, and they looked at me like I had 3 heads. And we canceled the marathon. We canceled the parade. And a week later, we canceled school. So for 2 years in a row, we have to think about what the American people have gone through and the people in this world have gone through. And we're not going to come back the way we went into it. But we have an opportunity. When you think about what the pandemic has done, sometimes you can look back, and my heart goes out to anyone in this room who lost a loved one during that time, because we did lose 1 million people in the United States of America, and we lost millions across the globe. But we have an opportunity right now to rethink what the workplace looks like. We have an opportunity right now to rethink of what our economy can look like. But we have to do it by respecting each other. We can't appreciate essential workers when there's a pandemic and forget about essential workers when the pandemic's over. Because the essential workers right now in Florida are in the grocery stores. The essential workers right now in Florida are waiting somewhere when the hurricane goes through to go out and pick up the power lines and clean the street and make sure they deliver the water and deliver the food and put safety in place if they have to. That's what our future looks like. And there's no reason to be afraid of labor. And the one thing I'll say to labor here, and I haven't said this before, we also have to look in ourselves and change the way we do business. We have to think about why is there fear of labor? And there's an opportunity at this moment in time to change that narrative. So I just want to say thank you to everyone here today. I want to give a couple more shout-outs. I want to thank Brian Doherty from the Boston Building Trades, who took my spot when I left to run for mayor of Boston. Frank Callahan from the building trades, from the state building trades. Frank and myself were running around the State House years ago. He was the lobbyist for the building trades, and I had a chance. And I want to thank Father Conway from St. Anthony Shrine, who's here as well. Let me just talk about Father Conway for a minute. If you're looking for somebody who's a living saint who walks around the streets of Boston, it's Father Conway, St. Anthony Shrine. St. Anthony Shrine today, before today is over, will have people out in the street talking to homeless folks, trying to help them out, trying to give them a shelter. I want to thank you, Father. I want to thank all the friars of St. Anthony Shrine for the amazing work you do. To all the labor leaders in here, my friends. Now, my job prohibits me from soliciting any contributions for any organizations, but Father Conway has an event coming up someday, so we'll go see Father Conway. He's the only guy dressed a little different than any of us. So, let me just say to end, thank you so much for this opportunity. This is it's kind of a homecoming for me being here today. It's great to see so many faces. I could literally shout out every person in this room today. I want to thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank State House News Service for the service you provide to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, both at the State House and across there. Continue to report the news. The other news outlets here today, thank you as well for being here today. This is a conversation. I'd suggest, I know when I leave, some of you will probably walk out with me, but I'd suggest you stay for this next panel, because there are some amazing people on this next panel that are going to tell some amazing stories about what a union has done for their life. Thank you. God bless.
This is our panel on the new power of labor in Massachusetts and beyond. Thank you so much to Katie Johnston for moderating. She's there with the handheld. Our panelists are Dana Alice, VP for BMC Community 1199 SEIU, United Healthcare Workers East. Teresa Mcgoldrick, Executive Vice President, National Association of Government Employees, NAGE, SEIU. Chetan Green, co-chair, the Building a Stronger Boston Building Trades Unions. Carlos Aramayo, president of Unite Here Local 26. And Dan Nicolai, district leader, SEIU 32BJ. Thank you all. And now, Katie, it's all yours.
All right. Can you guys hear me okay? So I'm Katie Johnston. I write about work and unions for the Boston Globe. And I'm very happy to be here with all of these esteemed labor leaders, some of whom I've talked to quite a lot. It's such an exciting time in this, there's so much energy around unions. Approval ratings are very high. There's lots of interest from workers. And so it's just a really interesting time to gather all these folks. So I think what we're going to do is just have you guys go around, introduce yourself again, and just maybe talk a little bit about the makeup of your union, and if you want to say a few words about what's happening with your organizing efforts now, and then we'll get to more specific questions after that. So, Dana, you want to start since you're on the left there?
Okay.
I don't know do you need this or
Scooch?
You don't have to lean forward. It should pick you up.
Okay. Is that all right? So I'm Dana Alice. I represent 1199 SEIU United Healthcare Workers East. We represent nursing homes, hospitals, personal care attendants, healthcare workers in the Commonwealth. I have been with the union now for almost 20 years. I come from New York, and as we've talked about, we are healthcare workers. So right now we have been dealing with a lot of tension with our workforce. Not tension, but our folks are the essential workers, and just really folks have been organizing to have a voice at work, and the folks that are already organized are looking for things that increase their job satisfaction. So that's what
Hey, my name is Chetan Green. I'm a Boston resident. I've worked in the city of Boston most of my life. I had the opportunity of joining the union around like 2014. I didn't really know much about what a union was at that point, but as soon as I did, it like changed my life. Like as soon as I joined, it felt like. So I work for the Sprinkler Fitters Local 550 Union, licensed sprinkler fitter. I'm now part of the Building Trades Union, which we try to look and see how we could get these opportunities, the same opportunities that I was afforded when I came in, how we could get these opportunities really out to our community, and not just by saying these things, but actually like getting out there. So me and a couple of my brothers and sisters from the building trades, we formulated a committee called Building a Stronger Boston, and our mission is in the name. It's like building a stronger Boston. And I kind of got the motivation from our Secretary Marty Walsh because of the Building Pathways program. That was a program that changed my life. So I'm like, okay, there has to be some other ways we can get our mission out there to the people that need it most. And so that became my mission, to find people just like me in the communities who really don't know what a union is, and for some people that really wish to have those type of benefits, who don't have to like stand alone in a fight for, negotiating and pay. The unions, we come together and we do it together. Everything we do is together. So yeah, that's my mission, just getting these opportunities out there, these great benefits, these great wages, and kind of letting people know they're not alone in this fight for equality. So that's it. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Teresa Mcgoldrick. I'm the National Executive Vice President of NAGE, which is the National Association of Government Employees. We are a national union. Our biggest membership is here in Massachusetts. I myself have been the local president for almost 20 years now, of about around 4,000 administrative professionals that work in the executive branch for state government. I'm a former state employee and prosecutor from child support, so I started out as a union member, and 20 years later, here I am, still doing work and working with my colleagues that I started out with. We also represent folks in the Department of Transportation, the Trial Court, Mass Water Resources Authority, UMass, county and municipal employees within many of the municipalities across Massachusetts. Really excited about this time in labor. As I said, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never felt sort of the hope and the inspiration and passion that seems to be happening around the labor movement, mainly among the most disenfranchised workers rising up against private sector and corporate greed across the nation, namely in Starbucks, Amazon, Chipotle, Apple, Google, Uber, Lyft, REI, Kellogg, and more, as you can see, across the nation is rising up. We also represent private sector employees across the nation. We have the largest national union for EMTs and paramedics, and they're among our least paid workers within NAGE, with the most dangerous and important job of saving the lives of people in the worst times of their life. And they're rising up in high numbers. We've organized in the last 4 years, since 2018, over 6,000 members in that sector of our union alone. And within the state, we're on track for 1,000 new members this year. I also see a real energy and enthusiasm around participation and activism in our union. We have a contract negotiations team election that we're having right now, and there are 8 spots to join this, to run for in this team. And 103 people registered in the last week to run for those 8 spots. We've doubled our number of stewards across the state from around 200 4 years ago to 500. We have tons of enthusiasm and support for the next contract negotiations. We had 6,500 participate in a survey recently, and out of 11,000. And it just shows that there's a lot of people paying attention, a lot of people that feel they've been, as Secretary Walsh said, disrespected in the workplace, forgotten in the workplace, fallen behind in wage growth, fallen behind in trying to keep up with the cost of living in both the public and especially the private sector. And I think that's the reason that you see the favorability ratings, which we can show later. I have a slide to show around a recent Gallup poll showing that We're at 71% favorability for labor right now, the highest in 57 years. So a very pivotal time, an exciting time to be in labor.
Good morning. My name is Carlos Aramayo. I'm the president of Unite Here, Local 26, the union of hospitality workers in the greater Boston area in Rhode Island. We represent 12,000 workers in hotels, university food service, other industrial food service, places like Fenway Park, Logan Airport, and also gaming workers at Encore Casino and Bally's Twin River. A little bit about myself. I first joined the union in 1996 as a teaching assistant, as a graduate teaching assistant at Yale University. I think basically because I fundamentally believe that if you have a boss, you need a union. I also was a member of the Clerical Workers Union in New Haven as well, and that's how I got my start with the organization that was affiliated with the hotel, at that time, the Hotel Employees Union. And I've been working with the Hotel Employees Union since the late 2000s. Our union is majority immigrant, majority women, majority black and brown. Our union represents folks who are service workers who work on the front lines every day. During the pandemic, we had folks working at hotels where the only folks who were staying at the hotels were first responders and folks working in the medical establishment. We had a lot of challenges in terms of health and safety, in terms of keeping people healthy, and unfortunately we did lose a number of our members during the pandemic. What that has meant is that a lot of our folks are now very, very active and very involved in trying to strengthen the union and trying to strengthen representation, and are very excited about figuring out how to grow our union and improve our standards going forward. And I'm happy to talk about that going forward. So thanks very much.
Hi, good morning. This is a great panel. So my name's Dan Nicolai. I'm the district leader for SEIU Local 32BJ. We are an East Coast private sector property services local. We represent about 20,000 people in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So our members clean, secure, and maintain maybe most of the major institutions in eastern Massachusetts, universities, office buildings, life sciences facilities, government buildings, Logan Airport. This has been a busy year for us. We recently, our security officer members, 2,500, ratified their regional agreement. We also just ratified an agreement on Mount Holyoke. We're bargaining right now with Boston University and MIT on contracts that cover about 1,500 people. This year, also as part of a coalition that included a lot of people in this room, there are some people in this room, we helped to pass the driver's license for all in the legislature. But that, as you know, that's on the ballot as question 4 in the fall. We're going to talk about challenges later, but that's definitely one of them as working people are more expressing our power, there's a reaction. So we're dealing with that. And next year we have our biggest contract, which is our regional master agreement for janitors, which covers about 13,000 people. We're very focused on organizing, I would say with even greater urgency coming out of the pandemic, and our members' experience in the pandemic, similar to what Carlos said. Many of our members were laid off during the pandemic. We represent about 2,000 people at the airport, and the majority were laid off at some point during the pandemic, and the rest had drastically cut hours and schedules. A lot of people got sick. We had more than 100 of our members died of COVID. Coming off of people's experience there, our members and people who seek to become our members are more determined than ever to have a real voice at work, to be able to have some control over safety and schedules and demand respect, as well as demand money, more money, because our members have felt the effects of hours cuts, schedule cuts, as well as inflation. The major focus of our organizing the past few years has been at the airport. We were able to reach an agreement with about 1,500 people who do aviation service jobs, and we continue to organize there. That was a place where 20 years ago, the jobs were decent jobs. People were working for airlines, cleaning airplanes, doing wheelchair assistance, and moving baggage. And because of subcontracting, there was a real race to the bottom where that became minimum wage and sub-minimum wage work. So we saw the effects of the changes in our economy, as well as how, by getting together, workers can fight to make their jobs better. So happy to be here today.
Well, I thought we should start by talking a little bit about the pandemic, which a couple of you talked about how it affected your workers. But for a lot of you, your focus shifted, at least at first, from to fighting for their jobs, fighting for people's safety, rather than simply trying to get them more rights. I just wondered now that we're kind of emerging a bit from the pandemic, if there are any lasting changes or new efforts emerging in this new world that we're facing, whether it's workers' energy or different groups that you're seeing or different techniques that you're using. I'd love to hear from any of you about what's different now.
Sure. So when the pandemic hit, I was laid off for a couple months. It affected me. But I was really secure because the union afforded me, I was making good money, so I was able to save and kind of prepare for this moment. And I really wish and hope everyone has that ability to kind of obviously we work hard, but also be able to save and kind of plan for, the unfortunate moments. So in getting these opportunities out to our residents, we knew that we needed a bigger online presence. We needed to not only be there physically, but also when they're online and they're logged in, we need to see those opportunities kind of put in their face. And that was one of the ways that really helped us with outreach. And a lot of people really started looking towards the trades as after the pandemic was kind of settled down a little bit, okay, these jobs, we need these type of jobs so we could create the savings, so we could create, certain households that may be 2-income households, okay, having a job that can secure a household for maybe a certain amount of time if your significant other just so happens to be laid off. So we really press the gas on getting these opportunities, especially in the online presence more, because people are home more, kind of looking for these opportunities. So we wanted to be right there in their face, the building trades unions, and that was one of the ways we kind of stepped up.
Can you talk a little bit more about how the digital organizing works, what you do? And I'm curious if other people are doing that more too. How do you reach people online?
Yeah, so we already know this is a social media world, right? So Facebook obviously has been really huge. And it's really those personal connections that we really had to tap into. It was, who do you know? Who do you know that wants these opportunities? And instead of a generic way of kind of putting it out there, we made it more personal. Because in these times, I feel being more personable with people, kind of sharing that personal story online, kind of would draw people in more to that. So that personal story, that personal touch is very valuable.
Okay, great. Any of the rest of you using more digital tools I understand you can also file union cards digitally, right? Yeah.
Well, in our Planned Parenthood organizing drive, we utilized a lot of those tools. We used online, digital organizing cards, and it was funny because maybe about 6 months ago, we had a meeting at the Union Hall, and this is when a lot of the committee got to meet each other in person for the first time. We did so much via Zoom and Teams and things like that, and it gave us opportunities, honestly, to connect a statewide network of workers that wouldn't necessarily have been able to make those connections. So that was really refreshing and different, and we've also been able to use that within our membership to convert to an online membership application, and how do we do more virtual membership meetings to get folks that we maybe wouldn't have gotten to talk to them about sort of upcoming things.
Right.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I just want to add to that we did very similar, went to a virtual mode. We had actually started to do it, thankfully, before the pandemic, to switch to trying to be online and have that presence so that if we're not able to meet in person at an orientation, that they'd be able to sign up their dues authorization through that mechanism. And literally, once the pandemic hit, everything went completely virtual. And as I said earlier, we're up, our numbers are up. People are signing up virtually, probably quicker than they would the old-fashioned way. We're still not able to get into a lot of our workplaces. The lasting effect, as you had asked earlier, for us, and the big takeaway, we were largely protected with our public sector. We didn't lose jobs, but we had tons of people that weren't able to work remotely prior to the pandemic that now continue to work remotely. It's the most popular benefit that my members surveying say they want to see in the future continue next to salary growth. So that's been a huge win. And during the pandemic, we were able to get almost 10,000 people laptops, VPN, other equipment to literally, be overnight working from home. We also represent frontline workers. We were able to negotiate PPE, plastic shields, additional, health and sanitation measures. We would close buildings down when there were outbreaks. So that activism really, weirdly, the pandemic became a weirdly a reason for a lot of people to become passionate about the union and re-engage in the union because they saw their job was saved during a time when lots of people were out of work. They saw that they were able to work from home and keep their families safe. And now that digital organizing and membership meeting tool is existing and is really the number one thing that we do. I do Zoom meetings every week during lunch hours with my members because it's easiest for them now that a lot of them are remote. So it's really transformed the world and how we do work.
I was really struck during the pandemic because when I would talk to some individual workers would reach out to me and people were scared for their jobs, but then I would talk to people represented by unions and their union leaders would reach out and they were, to see in action this layer of protection that the union workers had was really, I knew it was there, but it was really incredible when it was a life or death situation and these other people were just like scrambling on their own and it was really profound. I wonder if any of you could talk about just kind of the energy you're feeling from workers, either if it's from current union members or from other groups of people reaching out to you, if you're seeing more interest, if you're seeing this drive that people are talking about to organize, a lot of, there's the labor shortage, there's young people, but what are you seeing in terms of energy from people that you hadn't seen before?
Just to that point, I think it was, people were able to have some level of protection with the union, but I think it was also community, because our members' experience of the working during the pandemic was, I think, fairly lonely and scary. You went to work, people didn't eat lunch together. People, oftentimes at the airport, they staggered the punch-in time so people wouldn't be at the room at the same time, so people didn't talk. People were wearing, and me too, as a rep and an organizer, going out wearing a mask. It's sort of odd to talk with people, but through Facebook, WhatsApp. I hate Zoom so much, but we've done a lot on Zoom. People were able to connect and talk about their experience, and people had protection through the union, but also were able to talk about and strategize. And even Miradu's here, who leads our security work, but I know you guys, in leading up to the contract, put together some of our contract proposals in Zoom meetings. And that was, in our sector where we've raised standards quite a bit, but everybody still has 2 jobs, if not 3 jobs. So people were joining union meetings while they were, not driving a passenger with Uber, but waiting in their car where they were working for Uber or at some other job or taking care of their kids at home. So that was, I think that's the difference, and people are getting used to that and starting to like it in some respects. And then the other thing is, we see this at the airport where there's a big sector who are union now, and others, this company Swissport, which is the biggest non-union company there, where we have an organizing drive, who are not union. People connect on social media. So people can, in a WhatsApp group, will leave kind of voice messages, comments about their experience at work, and others who have a union can say, well, Swissport, a lot of people now are working 7 days a week because they're understaffed and they can't find people, so people are working like crazy and interacting with union folks who are saying, well, we have a process where we have some control over our schedules and we can have time for childcare or classes or whatnot. So it's I don't know, in a way, the coming out of the isolation, people have a new way of communicating about their jobs and kind of what's possible, like how a better job could be possible if you had a voice at work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, I think in the hotel industry, I saw the most profound difference, and I think workers did too, between unionized and non-unionized workplaces during the pandemic. And at non-unionized workplaces, workers were permanently terminated. They were fired from their jobs. This happened at the Four Seasons, the Revere, the Marriott Copley, non-union hotels, and many of those jobs were then subcontracted to lower wage jobs. And so you saw employers take advantage of the fact that their employees were not represented by a union who was going to stand up and fight for them collectively, and try to permanently change the labor cost structure in the middle of a global pandemic when people weren't able to be at work. Whereas in a unionized workplace, many of the hotels in Boston, we were able to secure PPE, we were able to secure extended recall rights, in other words, people's ability to keep their jobs through the pandemic, and protect against things like subcontracting in the middle of a pandemic. And so at a very basic level, let alone getting into the social aspect and people being able to talk to each other, the pandemic caused from my perspective, the clearest difference between a union workplace and a non-union workplace. And I think a lot of workers in our industries have seen that. A lot of workers who don't work union saw that their employer actually, no matter what the rhetoric was, didn't really care that much about them as soon as there was a huge crisis. And they also saw, because people live in communities and know each other, that folks in the union workplace, literally Local 26 phone banked every single one of its workers in the first 2 weeks of the pandemic to ask them if they needed help with unemployment, to tell them that we were going to use the reserves of our health fund to maintain people's health care, and to ask them if they needed any other assistance because they weren't able to leave their home, and could a union rep or a volunteer with the union come and assist them at their homes. No employer did that. No employer, union or non-union, did that. And I think that, I don't think we stand alone. I know a lot of unions did things like that. But people talk, right? People talk to their family members. People talk in their communities. They talk at school. And I think a lot of what's happened, and I think we've seen a lot more interest in people wanting to join our union, right, is because people just heard about what happened over the last 2 years. And there's really, tale of two cities. It's really a tale of two cities. And I think folks realized that at the end of the day, if you don't have an independent organization to stand up for you, that you're not organized with your coworkers, no one's going to help you out. And I think that's where the interest is coming to drive towards unionization right now. But there is still a challenge, which is it is still extremely difficult to unionize a workplace and to get a first contract in the United States. Thank God we have the most pro-union administration ever. And I say pro-union because the administration, Marty and President Biden, they listened to unions. He said, I brought the organizers in, and the president came to hear what they had to say. And they understand that unions are the representatives of hundreds and thousands or millions of workers who have hopes and desires and want to see change. But that is fantastic that we have that pro-union, but we still need real change. Look at Starbucks. They've organized 200 plus Starbucks. There's not a single contract yet. Look at Amazon. It was organized. There's not a single contract yet. We're in multiple disputes with hotels right now where we've organized the hotel, Hyatt-centric, right down the street, and they've hired a fleet of lawyers who's using every single trick in the book to not get to a contract so that folks can have the protection that our members enjoyed during the pandemic. And that is the challenge that we face, turning what is a broad interest in the union into a real force in our economy and renewed force in our economy that will represent working people and have working people have a real seat at the table as we make decisions about the future of the economy in the United States.
Well, and speaking of pushback from management, I wonder if others can speak to, yes, there is some leverage for workers and unions, but management is also hiring, these union busing lawyers like crazy. So I wonder if you guys are seeing a higher level of there's energy on one side, but there's also the pushback on the other side. What are you seeing from management as far as challenges to unionization efforts?
I can speak on that. Like I said, I was laid off for 4 months during the pandemic. It was actually the first time I was ever laid off. So I knew there was like, wow, this is definitely a pandemic, you know what I mean? And a lot of my friends from the building trades, a lot of people experienced probably their first layoffs around that time, which, being from the neighborhood, I'm walking around and I'm seeing certain jobs go up, and I'm like, it made me question now, even the smaller jobs, whether they were union or non-union, you know what I mean? Because I'm we're laid off. This is a very, very trying time, especially for everybody across the whole country. But specifically, like in Boston, it was like, oh, maybe I need to keep a closer eye on even the smaller projects that kind of pop up in our neighborhood, and how can we be more active in the process before it gets built on ensuring that these jobs go union, because they directly benefit the people that live in those communities. So it kind of made me look at it from a closer aspect, you know what I mean? Just leaving my house, walking to work. I'm just keeping my eyes open on what's happening, what's going on, and because it's, by the time the job goes up and it's already being built non-union, it's like we're kind of late, you know what I mean? So now it's like we can't even afford to be late, because our members can really, really benefit from being on top of even the smallest jobs going up in our city. And I think that's where the strength, we changed and kind of kept a closer eye on, okay, it's not only the big jobs that you see that are skyscrapers and stuff like that. It starts from even the smaller jobs all the way up to the big jobs. So just keeping an eye on those things in our neighborhoods.
Right, that makes sense. Dana, you had mentioned some challenges and just among workers themselves. I don't know if you want to speak to some of the things you were facing.
I think what we're facing now is definitely staffing shortages throughout all of healthcare. It creates a tension because we absolutely, employers are throwing money and incentives and shift incentives and bonuses and things at workers and wanting to do those sorts of things, which brings in new folks. But it doesn't necessarily acknowledge the folks that have been there and stayed and said, I'm going to be in it and I'm going to be with you, and how do we acknowledge those folks at the table as well? And also just the way COVID directly impacted healthcare and healthcare workers, how it changed people's relationship to work. The staffing crisis is very real, and we're struggling with how do you define, how do you increase worker satisfaction? Because it's not just about money, right? It's about a voice. It's about having respect. It's about all these other things. And how do you explain that to employers? Like, listen, we've got to bring everything here. And I think one of the good things that came out of it is that folks are finally acknowledging their worth and ready to stand up for it, right? Because I think before, service workers, it's like, all right, we'll fight for what we can get. We think we can get this. But I think what people's expectations have really skyrocketed, and rightfully so. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that sort of action and tension around those wages.
Sure.
I just want to jump on what you said. I completely agree with, I really think that it was an aha moment, the pandemic, for workers, whether they were secured in their job, but they still had that time to think about, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Do I want to continue to work these long hours and not see my family and go without, or not, not get the wage increase I was looking for. Why don't I just, leave this or retire and move on? And because of that, I think that has a lot to do with the labor crunch we're experiencing now, because a lot of people voted with their feet and they left positions that they felt, either disenfranchised within or disrespected or mistreated, or they just had had enough. And because of that, I think, employers now are scrambling, including the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to recruit people into these jobs that at one time were highly sought after. And a lot of it has to do with, the inflationary crisis that exists right now, the labor crunch, and job opportunities for people across the board that everyone is vying for these employees to join their ranks. But it's an interesting time that we're in, and it's a real opportunity for labor to use to get better wages, benefits, flexibility, telework, frontline protections for workers that are still at risk at this time, because there is such a shortage and such a crisis, and because people know they're not going to put up with what they used to put up with before the pandemic.
Yep.
So,
Dan, did you want to talk about some of the challenges that you all are seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to the employers don't want unions, and but I mean, I guess as Dana, as you're talking about healthcare, we're demanding, and we need to demand accountability at some level from the healthcare, hotels, the airline industry, the law firms. These people who got so much of our tax dollars got bailed out during the pandemic, after the pandemic, and are now showing up with anti-union law firms, these huge PR efforts. You talked about Starbucks and Amazon, and just are simply resisting people who, many of whom worked through the pandemic, took risks that affected our families and our neighborhoods, and just want to have a voice at work and make a better living and get better benefits. And at some level, when, for example, our union has a working with Senator Markey and Congresswoman Presley and others on a bill called Good Jobs, Good Airports, which would connect federal assistance to airlines to job quality for airline employees and contractors of airline employees. Partly for that reason, because we've seen so much assistance to corporate America and there's a lack of accountability. So that's not exactly your, but when I hear about healthcare institutions and others resisting unions, I feel like we've got to hold them accountable. As a society, we've got to hold them accountable.
Well, and Teresa, you had talked about the high approval ratings for unions right now. I think it's the highest in decades, right? Is there a way to capitalize on that? If just public sentiment for unions, do you use that to campaign and try and recruit workers?
I think, I think it's doing it for itself. I mean, the rising up and the successes, although they're not actualized yet, Starbucks, for example, Workers United has over 200 unfair labor practice charges filed for stores that are all, all workers that are all in this fight to beat back the basic, denial of benefits, termination of these employees, many of them very young workers, maybe for the first time in their lives involved in a union. I think all of those examples are being, put in front of us in social media every single day of the week, and it's causing people to really rise up and become more involved, or say, my daughter who's in college is, never really understood what I did for a living, but now, of course, it's kind of the cool thing to be in a union or to get involved because everyone's talking about it. So
we need a new poll. Our union's cool.
I have to say, there was another poll on top of the slide that I'd sent over to you. There's a Gallup poll that said we're at 71% approval for Americans, but it's 77% for Generation U, which is 18. They polled 18 to 34-year-olds. So they're really excited about this. Now, this is huge for us because, unfortunately, we've seen for the past 20 years, membership numbers slowly go down. People, saying the labor movement's on its way out. It's a thing of the past. People don't need unions anymore because employers are so progressed and evolved and they're doing great with their workers. Well, a lot of things show us that wasn't happening, isn't happening, and now people who are never involved in the labor movement before and are excited and energized are jumping in. And I think it's an opportunity we have to jump on and say, yes, the approval rating's higher. The other thing is talking about elected leaders. That makes all the difference in the world. Not only did we suffer the pandemic, we suffered Trump. I mean, we represent federal workers who lost their rights, essentially, to represent unionized employees. They lost official time to do that. They lost, basically, his appointments to the NLRB grinded labor actions to a halt, so we couldn't challenge things as the panel was speaking about earlier. And so all of these things matter. They all kind of came together in a perfect storm. The pandemic, the Trump years, and helped labor to actually come back from where it was, which was we were losing membership. We were losing that solidarity and strength until people hit rock bottom and they realized they needed labor's help to get out of this. Mm-hmm. And so now we have President Biden, we have Secretary Walsh, we have the most labor-friendly administration in history. We have to make the most of it. Now is the time, and utilizing that social media and getting the young people involved is going to be key, I think, in turning this all around. And they're already there. They're ready to do it. So now it's up to us to elect leaders, continue to elect leaders that will support us so we can get it done, undo the damage that's been done in this country to basically block labor action legally at the NLRB and beyond, and to basically get things done for our members, because that's what we're here for. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lot of talk about, workers, of course, want better benefits and higher wages, but what they really want now is respect, right? A lot that people, Secretary Walsh mentioned that they want respect. So how do you put that into a union contract? What do you do to signal to workers that they are getting respected by their employers?
So, this is something we've dealt with a bunch recently, and, I think this goes back, frankly, to before the pandemic. I mean, in the 2018 contracts that we negotiated with the hotel industry after the 6-day strike at Marriott, we looked to not just, so first of all, I should say, I do think wages is a form of respect, so let's just be clear about that. So, not only did we negotiate significant wage increases, significant protection of benefits, which I think also are a real sign of respect, but we negotiated things like protection around the implementation of new technology, right? So a process by which workers would be involved in the implementation of new technology. Why? Because new technology usually replaces workers. Secondly, we negotiated language around sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is a huge problem in the hospitality industry. It's a huge problem between management and workers, and client and guests and workers. And so we negotiated language around panic buttons, but also around the union and union representatives, shop stewards, having access to guests whose complaints were filed against, which previously was very, very difficult to deal with, right? And so it would allow the barring of certain guests who were repeated offenders. That is a respect issue, fundamentally. We also negotiated language around participation in one of the challenges we have in the hotel industry is food and beverage, restaurants, right? Because the restaurants compete against a lot of restaurants that aren't in the hotels. And in the hotels, there's certain requirements about how long they're open and all of that sort of thing. We negotiated language where workers go together with management to talk about how to make the restaurant successful. So it's not management coming in saying, hey, I've got this new idea from this consultant, although they may come in and say that anyways. But there's a process where workers actually talk about, like, yeah, that idea really is going to work. That's a really awesome idea. That's going to increase my gratuity, and we're going to get more people in the door. Or that idea is kind of harebrained. Like, let me explain to you from my experience why it's harebrained, and we probably shouldn't do it. And so those are some things that we've done in the hotel industry around the respect issue.
And within healthcare, we utilize some of those very same labor management committees, we call them, and use them to give teeth to some of the on-the-floor issues that are going on. And how do you problem solve? How do you talk about what's going on? How do you create the situation on the floor that's going to be a little bit easier for folks to work through and manage through sort of situational stuff, and have folks be able to have an equal voice at the table to say, this is what I think my concerns are, these are what my ideas are, how do we work on a solution together in addition to the money?
Exactly. So from a building trades standpoint, we know that Boston is a union city. There's three type of developers that come to our city. The good ones, the one that know that these job sites need to be safe, these job sites need to be more diverse. Then it's the ones that we have to convince that the union is good. You know what I mean? That the union is the best way for our working people. And then lastly, there's the people that really don't share any of our values. They put profits over people. They're just really concerned about just making money, and those are the people that are not invited in our city. We don't want them in our city because they don't share the values of the community, and that's the thing that we try to figure out who's who. We try to figure out, okay, what is going to benefit our community? Who has our community's benefit in the best interest? You know what I mean? And we try to spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. Respect comes with, if a job site isn't safe, being able to say, hey, that's not safe, I'm not going to do it, and know that your job is not in jeopardy, that your union is going to stand behind you. And that's in any situation, harassment situation, and wages are contractually, they're contractual, so you're going to get paid. It's the training that goes along with it, so making sure that you're prepared and to do the job and qualified to do the job that you're assigned to do. So respect is a big thing in every step of the process when it comes to working on site.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I know we're pretty much out of time, but I wondered if any of you wanted to share any recent successes that you've had or big wins, whether it's contracts. I know, Carlos, you guys just had a big one with Northeastern, or new groups that you brought in. If any of you want to share some of those successes, that'd be great.
Well, our big organizing drive that we just completed was Planned Parenthood, so we're really excited about that. And we sit down to the table actually next week, so we are looking forward to that. And we've got a ton of contract fights, so you will see 1199 in motion, just like we said about sort of securing what we've learned and fighting for what folks know they deserve. And
I've mentioned it before, but I'm just really excited about the Building a Stronger Boston committee that we just launched less than a year ago. And we built it to create that bridge between communities and unions. We felt like that needs to be stronger. And then it's so how do you do that? And I feel like we need union members from each neighborhood to kind of meet and kind of discuss the individual issues in each neighborhood. So if there's a bad developer in town in a certain neighborhood, we may know about, but the person living in that neighborhood may know about it. So we create that committee, we create that conversation around whether it's supporting somebody supporting somebody in leadership, or that is going to have our best interests in that particular neighborhood. So kind of dissecting it just a little bit more and being intentional.
That's great.
And just to reiterate, I had said earlier that we represent EMTs and paramedics, and these are among our least paid workers across the nation, doing, again, the most important work, saving people's lives. With little or no training, with little or no experience, they're put right into these jobs and expected to save people's lives. And we're really energized in this sector. We've organized over 6,000 since 2018, roughly 1,000 a year, and I really think that shows that the youngest and the most disenfranchised folks are rising up and gaining the most. And we're actually in the middle right now of a contract dispute out in LA, where we have hundreds of workers about to go on strike, but we're trying to negotiate that out, and that I'm hoping, fingers crossed, will be another success story and very energizing for our union.
Love it.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about Northeastern quickly. So we just negotiated the richest contract in Local 26's history at Northeastern University with Compass Group. And It's $9.32 in increases over 4.5 years. It's to over $30 an hour by the end of the contract. It's a 95-5 cost split on the top platinum plan for the healthcare. It's full pension full pension contributions to the local 26 pension. It's guaranteed that 75% of the jobs will be 40 hours a week, which was a huge respect issue on that campus. And it is a guarantee that folks call, like on the respect issue, if there's a call out, that call out will be replaced, which is a workplace workload issue that was extremely important to the workers. A lot of other stuff as well. The reason we won that, and I think this gets to some of the stuff the secretary said, is one, we were 92% strike ready on the eve of the last negotiation, heading towards 100%. We had overwhelming popular support on the campus among the students. There was a coalition of 64 student groups of every kind you can imagine backing up the dining hall workers. And we had a university and a contractor, Compass Group, who was willing to listen. And I think that was really, really important, right? I don't think we could have actually settled without some there was some conflict, but without some massive conflict if that third thing wasn't there. And, we sat in bargaining till 4 a.m, but you could tell that the folks who came from Compass Group really wanted to hear what the members of our bargaining committee wanted to say. And that's how we were able to achieve. It was the three things together, but the third thing really mattered. And so for folks from the business community, listening to what your workers have to say can really help make real transformation in what these jobs are like.
So we've had, as I said, we struggled in the pandemic. We lost members, but we've grown really at the airport and security the last couple of years. Had about 2,000 people join the union. But I guess I'm just thinking of, because this just happened, I just want to talk about one person. So we had 2 days ago, we had what's called a shift bid meeting. It's labor management committee, like Dana was talking about, at a company called G2 at the airport. So what happens is the airlines add flights, they take away flights, or they change their schedule. And so the wheelchair assistants and the aircraft cleaners, the schedule changed because they're a contractor. They do what the airline tells them. So 5 years ago, before the union came in, when that happened, the manager would say, your schedule's different now. I know you've been working days. Now I need you in the evening, and I need you for 3 hours, instead of... So it was tremendously disruptive. And one of our leaders in the campaign was a woman named Sadia Mohammed. She was a spokesperson. She's told this story in public, so I'm going to tell it. So she used to work for a company called FSS, and we were, just talking to her about her situation. She lived in Chelsea, and I learned in the course of the conversation that she was getting off work at 2 o'clock in the morning and was walking home to Chelsea from Logan Airport at 2 in the morning because there wasn't good transportation from the airport, and she couldn't pay for a cab because she was making below the minimum wage because she was a wheelchair assistant. So Sadia works now for G2. There's been some consolidation. G2 bought FSS. So we have now, because of the union, what's called a shift bid meeting. And so when the shifts change, what the company has to do is come in, meet with our committee, and say, here are the new shifts, and in order of people's seniority, they can, not pick their shift, but they can have preference over the shift because they've been there longer. So Sadia, because she was with FSS for 5 years, now she's in G2, and because of the union, she gets to carry that seniority to her new employer, which she couldn't have done before. Was able to pick a shift where, her schedule didn't change that much. She cares for her mom at home. She, has another job also, so she can still do it. So that's, to me, stuff like that is what we're kind of fighting for on a bigger scale, is people not just getting, and that's maybe earlier talking about respect. That's People are entitled to that at work. Everybody should have that kind of right at work, but, what is it? 7% private sector has a union, so most people don't, but that's what we're fighting for.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks very much, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.